from northern New Jersey talks like this, you know? That's the Sopranos, it's not us. Now Kathy and I, my wife Kathy and I moved down to the South about 10 years ago. We moved to North Carolina. And my aunt, who lives here in Maryville, Merville, kept telling me, you gotta come to East Tennessee. Family here, you can't swing the dead cat in East Tennessee without hitting a Goddard. And 3 years ago, we finally came over, and come to find out, my family has been here, as my old boss used to say, since Christ was a corporal. So we didn't really move, we just came home. So I have two stories for you tonight. We live in a society that seems to go out of its way to say nasty things to one another at every opportunity. And I am sorry to say that as much as I try, I'm as guilty as the next guy, I guess. But I heard a story that helps me, and I want to give it to you. In the early 1950s, a professor at a theological seminary out in the Midwest somewhere decided to use their summer vacation, him and his wife, and visit the Smoky Mountains. And they stayed around Gatlinburg. And one morning, they went to a local little spot to have breakfast. So they're sitting there enjoying their cup of coffee, and he notices there's a white-haired gentleman, white shirt, dark suit on, going from table to table. Well, that professor says, I really would just like to have my breakfast in peace. But, I should be polite. And the gentleman came over. Says, how you folks doing? And we're fine. Where are y'all from? We're from Kansas. What you do in Kansas? Well, I teach at the theological seminary out there. Well, it's nice to have you here in Gatlinburg. So you teach preachers how to preach. Now I got a story for you. And the professor went, oh dear Lord, not another preacher story. But without saying another word, that old gentleman pulls up a chair and sits down and says, quite a long time ago, there was this boy born to a single mother. And everywhere that boy went, he was haunted by the people in that town of his. They seemed to take great delight in looking at that boy and smile and say, hey boy, who's your daddy? And of course that boy would hang his head and run away, and them adults would just start cackling. Now, I don't know why they did that to that little boy. Certainly was mean. Maybe they did it just because they had a mean streak, or maybe they did it because it gave them a moment to forget their own sins and their own lives. But every place this little boy went, he heard, hey boy, who's your daddy? And of course, once the parents started, the kids pick it up too. So even going to school was a horror for that little boy. He wouldn't go out outside and play with the other kids, wouldn't eat lunch with them, because they'd start and they were just as bad as the adults. Or even on Sundays, he'd go and stand and watch and be the last one inside the church, so he could sit all the way in the back. And he knew the service, so he knew when it was about to end, and he'd sneak out as fast as he could, just so he couldn't hear, "Hey boy, who's your daddy?" Well, he went to church one Sunday, and there he had forgotten that the usual pastor wasn't there that Sunday. It was going to be someone new. Now, the old pastor, you've all seen him, I'm sure, he glues himself to one spot up on the pulpit and never moves. Maybe he comes down from the pulpit at the benediction at the end. Well, it wasn't that way with this new pastor. Why, this preacher was all over, up at the pulpit, amongst the crowd, out in the middle of the choir, and the service ended and found this young pastor standing at the only door to the church. And this young man was trapped. Couldn't get out now. He had to get in line with everybody else. So he just did. And it came time to walk up to the pastor, and the pastor shook his hand and looked around and said, "Son, where's your daddy?" Well, of course, all the people behind him, they start snickering. And well, I guess it's with the power of the Lord that enlightened this pastor at that particular time. The pastor figured out what was going on. He put his hand on this little boy's shoulder and said, "Wait a minute. I know. I see the family resemblance. You're a son of God. You're a child of God, aren't you? Son, you go ahead now, but you remember, you have an important family history to live up to. You go do your work now, and have a good day." Well, from then on, that boy wasn't looking down at his shoes as he walked amongst town. He walked proud. And whenever one of the townspeople would say, "Hey boy, who's your daddy?" he'd throw back his shoulders and say, "I'm a child of God." Now, what do you think of that story? And the professor said, "Why, that was one of the best stories I've ever heard. Do you mind if I use that in class?" And the old man said, "Nah, you go right ahead." And he gets up. And he starts to walk away. And he stops. He comes back. He says, "You know, that preacher had never told me I was a child of God, I don't think I would have made a thing of myself. Y'all have a good day." And he walked off. Well, the professor looked at his wife and goes, "Now I have to tell that story to the class." And they called over the waitress. And he said to her, "That white-haired gentleman who was sitting here by us, do you know who he is?" She goes, "Oh, sure, that's Ben Hooper. He's the governor of Tennessee." Well, Ben passed away in the late 1950s. And he was born illegitimate son of an unwed woman in the 1870s, a time nowhere near as enlightened as we have now. And he must have been quite a special person, because in 1917, he was elected governor of the state of Tennessee. And he must have been special, because here in the early 50s, people still recognized him as the governor. So from then on, from the time I first read that story, and it's supposed to be true, I already looked it up, whenever I'm about to tell someone where to go and how to get there, I think of myself, who's your daddy? Thank you. Now, as Roland said at the beginning, November is the month of Telebration, international celebration of the tradition and the art of oral storytelling. I bet you all have your favorites. It could be Bill Landry if you're in East Tennessee, or Garrison Keillor, Jeannie Robertson. I like Arlo Guthrie, but it's me from the late 60s. But I'm here to tell you about the best storyteller I have ever come across. And I'm talking about the one and only Telling John Robertson. Now, Telling John was up from around Johnson City. Now, I first came to hear of Telling John in September of 1970, when I enrolled as a freshman at Tusculum College. Back then, Greene County was dry except for beer, so if you wanted anything extra special to wet your whistle, you had to come up to Johnson City. Well, this one Saturday night, some friends and I had gone up that way to see a concert. And the concert got over, and we decided to have something extra special to wet our whistle. And we went into a little bar. I wish I could remember the name of it, but I can't. Anyway, we sit at the bar and we order our drinks. And I noticed, way over there's a crowd gathered, all with their backs to the rest of the bar. And they were quiet, but occasionally you'd hear a little giggle, some muted laughter. And I called the bartender over, said, "What's going on over there?" And the bartender looked at me and says, "You ain't from around here, are you?" I said, "No, sir." He says, "Well, that's just Telling John holding court." I said, "Well, who's Telling John, and what's he holding court about?" "You mean to tell me you ain't never heard of Telling John Robertson? Why, he's the best darn storyteller in these parts. Why, he'll tell a story at the drop of a hat, and he'll drop the hat himself. It's lucky John isn't a Catholic, because if he had to go to confession and he got to talking, that priest had better bring a bag lunch. He's going to be there for a while." But anyway, John comes in every Saturday night and starts telling stories, and more than likely, he tells a wonderful story of his grandpa's old ram. And people come every Saturday just to hear that story. So we looked over and watched what was going on. We couldn't get anywhere near that storyteller. And after a while, the crowd dispersed, leaving an old man dozing in his chair. So we decided to come back the next Saturday to hear Telling John tell the wonderful story of his grandpa's old ram. As a matter of fact, we came back on more than one Saturday night. They called us one of the Saturday night regulars. And we would listen to Telling John tell that marvelous story of his grandpa's old ram. And Telling John, every time he told it to perfection. And the reason was his attention to detail. And that's exactly what the problem was. You see, Telling John's memory was so good and so pure and so detailed, right down to the tiniest little bit, it defeated his every attempt to tell the wonderful story of his grandpa's old ram. Well, every Saturday night, he'd sit in the same place, in the same chair. And with a minimum amount of coaxing and a copious amount of bourbon, he would start telling that wonderful story of his grandpa's old ram. And he'd sit down and look up, and he'd take a sip of his bourbon, probably about the fourth or fifth one that evening, and he'd start. Now, back when I was about yo-high, my grandpa bought himself an old ram, and he put him inside the fence up on the hill. He got that ram from Daniel Jacobson. Yeah. Now, I heard tell that Daniel had to sell that ram because of a debt he owed. Yeah. Daniel was well known in these parts. A church-going, God-fearing man who only had two vices. One was gambling, and the other was cheating at it. I guess that's how come he had to sell that old ram. Yeah. Well, Grandpa sets this ram up on the hill and fits him out with a bell. And I heard tell of Daniel one time over yonder got caught cheating at poker, and the other fellas at that table, they just picked him up by his overalls and threw him right through a plate glass window. Yeah. Landed right on top of Miss Amy Watson. Yeah. So Grandpa, he has the ram uphill, and Grandpa's downhill tending to the other animals. And Miss Amy Watson, one of the kindest people you ever meet in your entire life. She had a glass eye, you know. I don't rightly know why she needed that glass eye. Might have been when she fell off her mule and it got scratched and infected. Her eye, not the mule. Yeah. So anyway, that ram is uphill, and Grandpa's downhill, bending over, feeding the other animals with his posterior pointing uphill. And the problem with Miss Amy was that glass eye didn't fit right. The result being that if she turned her head real quick, well, that glass eye would pop off and go rolling along the floor with her chasing right after it. Yeah. So Grandpa is feeding the other animals, and that old ram was up there looking down, and the reason that glass eye didn't fit right was it weren't fit proper. Doctor didn't fit it. I heard tell that Miss Amy's father won that glass eye in a poker game. So the ram, seeing Grandpa bent over in this attitude, sort of took it as an invitation. And who bets a glass eye at a poker game? Well, that was old Ben Spencer for you. He bet that glass eye at a poker game. Yeah. Miss Amy had a sister, you know, Miss Jenny. Now, Miss Jenny was born deformed, whereas Miss Amy lost her eye by accident. Miss Jenny was born without one, with just an empty socket, and she wore a black patch for a while, but the kids would call her One-Eyed Jenny in the Spanish Main and teased her something fierce. So Amy would lend her glass eye whenever she wanted to go to town. So the truth was, you never saw the two girls together at the same time. So Grandpa's bent over downhill, and old Ram's uphill, and he starts coming downhill, and Miss Jenny was such a sweet thing. She was a little thing, too. I bet she didn't weigh 100 pounds with rocks in her apron. So there was the problem. See, that glass eye was too big for her. Result being, she looked at everything as if she had suddenly surprised. Well, of course, people told her how wonderful she looked. It sort of looked like Quasimodo. So the ram starts heading downhill. You know, that mule of Miss Amy's was the stubbornest creature God ever put on this earth. I mean, if you wanted to go, he'd stop. If you wanted to go right, he'd go left. You couldn't push, pull, or pray this animal to do anything he didn't want to do. Still can't figure out why Ben Spencer bet a glass eye at that poker game. So the ram starts making his way downhill, and Ben had a daughter, you know. Yeah, Miss Patty. Oh, Miss Patty. The most popular girl in these parts. Every boy just loved Miss Patty. She was the flirtingest girl you ever saw in your life. I heard tell one day she got a hold of old Ben's car, and the policeman pulled her over for speeding. By the time she got flirting, she flirted her way into a steak dinner on the arm of the policeman what pulled her over. Oh. 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 That, you know, they gave credit to that mule for stopping a bank robbery. Miss Amy rode him into town one day and tied him up on the post, and some idiot was in the First National Bank trying to rob it, and he comes out right near that mule and fires a couple shots in the air just to scare folks. No, I don't know what it did for the folks, but it sure did put a burr in that mule's body. He broke loose of that post and let loose with a good hind kick, caught that boy right upside the head, laid him out flat as a mackerel. He didn't wake up till he was already behind bars. Now, Grandpa didn't know that the ram was, I bet you wonder how Ben came to that, having that glass eye. Now that there's a story in itself. Ben went to the county fair one day, and he went to one of them booths, you know, and the wall was full of balloons, and he shot a BB gun at it, and if he hit the balloon and popped it, it released a ping pong ball that would come rolling down, and on the ball would tell you what prize you won. Well, the guy who ran that booth, I guess, it angered somebody who snuck behind that wall and substituted a glass eye for one of them ping pong balls. Well, Ben, he shoots the thing, and down comes this glass eye, rolls right in front of him. The guy who ran that concession didn't know what to say, and Ben said, I'll just keep the glass eye as a memento of the county fair. Yeah. So that ram, he starts heading downhill, and Grandpa don't know it yet. And Ben's daughter, Miss Patty, married Tom Horner some time back. Yeah. Yeah. And the ram, he comes coming down that hill, picking up speed. You know, they say that when the Lord comes for Miss Patty, she don't have to worry about a thing. Don't matter what she did on this here earth. She was going to flirt her way right past St. Peter. Yeah. So Grandpa finally hears that bell coming toward him, and he straightens up and looks at that ram, and that ram stops. No, she didn't marry Tom Horner. Tom Horner was nobody. Tom Horner was the cheapest skinflint in East Tennessee. Yeah. Well, they caught him one Sunday making change out of the collection plate. Yeah. So anyway, there those two are, the ram looking downhill, and Grandpa looking up, and they're just staring at each other, chewing. One's chewing on some grass, and the other's chewing on a plug of tobacco. And that happened to be the same Sunday that Miss Amy got baptized. Now, they used a big galvanized tub for their baptisms. So Miss Amy, she backs up to the tub, and the preacher says whatever it is the preacher says, and he dunks her backwards, and up she comes sputtering and shaking her head, and that glass eyeball goes pop up in the air, lands in amongst the choir. We're all doing the whoo. I guess they thought it was bad luck to step on a glass eye or something. And one of the men in the choir gets it and goes, "Here you go," and tosses her the eye. So Grandpa and Ram were staring at each other. What fool tosses a glass eye to a one-eyed person? Why, it came at her from the blind side, hit her right in the arm, and she went, ah! And it went up in the air and landed right in the baptismal tub. So there she is with the preacher up to their elbows in holy water, trying to find that glass eye. Yeah. So Grandpa starts heading toward that ram. That preacher ended up marrying Miss Jenny. He bought her own glass eye, so the sisters didn't have to share no more. My grandpa, he and he'd fall asleep. And the crowd would disperse, and that's where he'd stay till closing time. And they'd come, and they'd wake him up, and he'd sort of, I'd best be going home, I guess. I'll see you next week. Now, you remind me, next week, I want to tell you the marvelous story of my grandpa's old ram. Thank you, everybody.